Hey, good morning. I'm on my way now to make a withdrawal at the bank, get some groceries, all fascinating stuff. But just a group of neighbours there just sitting under a tree in the shade. But this morning, one of those Facebook memories came up. It's a picture of Beth and I on our wedding day, and then underneath, this is Facebook, underneath was something of my story about how I came to be in the Philippines, and it really reminded me of the fact that many of us have to overcome losing everything. So this video is about not just about losing everything, but how to overcome the fact that you've lost everything. See, when you lose everything, I've had this happen to me several times where I've just lost everything. Usually for a man, it's all tied up with divorce, which I've had more than my fair share of. One of the reasons that we should all be seeking, I feel, to have spiritual development is because if you just take care of the toys. I used to see a bumper and said the winner is the man who has most toys, who when he dies has most toys. This is all to do with the physical, isn't it? It's all to do with being materialistic. And if you identify completely with just being materialistic, if you lose that, you have nothing, because you've associated your own identity, your own persona, whatever you want to call it, your own feeling of you, with things. And you can lose things. Whereas if you invest the time in developing yourself, then it cannot be taken away from you. I remember a friend in the UK, when I'd lost everything, said to me, he said, "Terence, I would be dead if I had had to confront what you have confronted, what you have experienced. If what has happened to you happened to me, I would just be dead. I'd be finished." So the idea that you should develop your own inner resources and your own inner strength is the most valid idea of all things, because riches you can lose. You can lose all of that. When I went first to California, having lost everything, I remember that we stayed at one time, we had a room in a fairly well-off woman's house, and my son, then was about 7 years old, and he had come. We arrived in America on his 2 days before his 6th birthday, I think it was, so 1992. And how to survive? Well, part of our survival journey was that this woman offered us a place. Now, it quickly became clear that we were just one of her toys, no romantic involvement. She was a lady that thought that all of her possessions were her. Maybe you've heard people talking like this. They'll say, yeah, my car, I've just had a new radiator put in, or they'll say, my air conditioning was not working, and I've had that fixed. Well, it wasn't their air conditioning. They don't have an AC unit in the back of their head. They're identifying with what is materialistic or material. So surviving, as I have found it, is in having developed your own inner resources, your own strength to the max. Now, lots of people say, I can't survive this. I don't know. And I see people people write to me. I see Facebook posts, and people are in desperate trouble because they haven't realized that all of the tools that they need to overcome any emergency, any catastrophe is right there inside them, in their inner self. And it's only when you realize this that you can overcome all of these things. Now, in the past, I've talked to people who are in the middle of a crisis, or an upset, if it was an upset between you and someone else, and you want to get over it. You can ask the question, well, how long will it take to get through this? And maybe 3 weeks is a time that comes to mind for them. So we can be through this in 3 weeks. You'll be able to go on in 3 weeks' time. Yes, I think that can happen. So is it possible we could do this maybe in 2 weeks' time? Could we be through this crisis in 2 weeks' time? Could you be overcome it? I've got to let this boy come past. Oh, he's in a tricycle. So if you can get them to the point where they can get through it in 2 weeks' time, could we get through it in 1 week's time? In a tricycle, getting water, I think. So could we get through it in 1 week's time? Could we get through it in 3 days' time? Oh boy, he's stuck in the mud. Nah, he got through it. Could we get through it in 1 day's time? Could we get through it this afternoon? Is it possible that we could view our friendship, our relationship, feeling good? Could we do it now? And gradually, it's possible to get someone to the point where they can see that time is only in their head as far as recovering from an upset. If you've ever found it's not a trick, it's an exercise. If you've got someone who is going through just not feeling great, just feeling unhappy, you can do the lotto. You can do the lotto with them. You've got to do it covertly. In other words, you can't say, let's do the lotto exercise. No, you can't do that. But you can say, it's at times like this that I wonder what the heck would happen if we just suddenly came home and we won the lotto. $100 million in America. They're winning 100, and I think sometimes $200 million in the lotto. So they say, well, yeah, boy, I would love to win the lotto. So then, well, what would you do? And you can take that person and you can get them to winning the lotto So here's an attitude of mind that they can take on. So they win the lotto. Okay, all right, so we won the lotto, now what? Well, one friend of mine said, well, the first thing that I would do is I would buy a car for each of my family, buy them a new car, and then they're on their own. So, okay, so that would be the thing to do there. Now, what else? Well, I always wanted to open a restaurant. Well, you could finance it with $100 million, let's face it. And so then they opened a restaurant. And what kind of restaurant would it be? What's that? Fast food or fine food? Or what would it be? And the next thing, they bought all of their family a new car, and now they've opened a restaurant, and they're in the restaurant, and you're working out the menu with them. And eventually, they're totally out of the depression and laughing and not regretful at the end of it that they didn't win, or maybe a little bit, that they didn't win the lotto. But it's an exercise, it's an attitude of mind which you have to be able to work with whatever the mind can do. And losing everything gets down to being a place in the mind. When the whole family was experiencing the fury of Odette, which was a super typhoon, we were in Nanai's house. We were all underneath a bed, one of those two-tier bunk beds, a double bunk bed made of tubular steel, and we all huddled under there while the roof was blown off, and then the torrential rain, and so we were soaking wet, and the wind was in an absolute fury, and we've lost the roof, and we know that we may well have lost everything else, including our lives. So now we're taken to the edge of losing everything. That's when you really have lost everything, when you no longer see anything and you're on your way either up or down, depending on your fortunes and your behavior. So then we come out in the morning, and we've survived, and then we look around. The house of Nanai has lost the roof. The house of our red house has lost the roof. Lena's house has lost its roof. Rado's house had lost part of its roof. All of them had lost their roof or part of it. And part of it may as well be the whole thing. We managed to save as little of Nanai's house as possible. And the portion of the roof over the kitchen was still okay. Now, strangely enough, our little guest house had not lost the roof, and it had minor damage which we were able to repair easily, and we all ended up living for the moment in Nanai's house. In the guest house was the way that it worked out. So we were sleeping side by side like sardines on the floor, and the couches, and a mattress here and a mattress there. So we'd lost everything. Now, in the Philippines, they've learned to lose everything. And some of them had very little to lose in the first place. So there's something to learn from them. How to smile when you've lost everything. We went out to the islands, and losing everything is an extra trip there, because the beach, we landed on the beach, and it was just like a sea of rubble. You can see some of the still pictures that I took of the beaches and the kids sitting among the broken houses and stones, eating the meal that we took out there for them. they've learned to change and adapt to what their situation is, which is no fun. But there's a choice. You have to assume that because you are alive, you have everything that you need to build up again. And that's what is the lesson. The lesson is that no matter what you lose, if you're alive, you have the chance of doing everything again and doing it better. Now, a friend that I have suffered a great deal of damage to his place. Now, he has a beautiful farm, but the two houses, one a smaller house that they were living in anyway, and a larger house, and the larger house was badly damaged and was a write-off. The roof gone, walls bent and damaged, and then the rain coming in afterwards and doing it. So the feeling is that they've lost everything. Now here's the exercise that can be used to overcome that. You think that you've lost everything. Let's imagine that you have this, really what is a beautiful piece of property, but the house that you so lovingly, as in our case, that we so lovingly built. I built our red house myself, single-handed, of a material that I knew I could handle myself. And I was at that age was 74, and I did it because I'd just come from America, where I'd lost everything, and now I have the chance to do something else, and my inner resources are there. There is a saying that God never gives you a challenge, prophet, that he does not give you the inner resources to handle that challenge. So the universe is adjusted so that you can overcome the worst possible tragedy and challenge. You know, when my brother died, I thought, what else is there to lose? I loved my brother. We called each other. When our parents both died, we promised each other that we would stay in touch, even though we don't live close to each other. We promised each other we'd stay in touch by telephone, and we did. And I cherished that relationship and missed him terribly. I overcame it. The pain is still there. I've learned to deal with it. You learn to deal with the challenges that are given you if you're paying attention. You may feel threatened by many, many things, but in the moment, right now, I have many enemies. I have many trolls who would love to see me in prison or deported or whatever they have in mind for me. Right now I'm sitting in my truck, which I love to drive, and I am in no danger whatever. And if you can get that feeling of being in the moment, you will overcome any tragedy, no matter who you have lost, no matter who has left your life, no matter how impossible it all seems. You have the inner strength to be able to overcome that. Because you are breathing, you have whatever degree of health you have. That is it. This seems to be a lesson that is needed to be learned by so many people, and especially at this time when people are dying. In the Philippines, people are dying, have died, are in starvation, are in complete hopelessness. But in the Philippines, somehow they've learned to be able to smile and to get through it, especially the children, who are incredible and are regarded, maybe this is a secret, children are not a burden in the Philippines. They are a blessing. And I'll finish off on that. Thanks for looking in. I hope that you got something from this.